Hi guys. So what I have open here for this week is a past week before we had the winter storm. Okay, so week 6, there was a blackout poetry assignment. Some of you were a little confused about what was due. Under Thursday, Friday, part 1. So notice this is week 6, Thursday, Friday, part 1. You were to submit an image of your blackout poem. So I do need that as soon as possible for a grade in the grade book. What I did note is that some of you, however, did create the part 2 section here. So that was also graded. So what we're down to, part 1 is the poem where you print out and modify a article about global warming, and then you submit it. Part 2 was an analysis, self-analysis of the actual work and the process you went through. So some of you did turn this in. What this comes down to, therefore, I need the image posted of the actual work. Just use your phone. And if you haven't created the analysis portion, I need that in as well. Okay? If there's any problems with submitting either of those two, I need you to contact me as soon as possible. And so far, I haven't heard back from anybody. So this is getting crucial. If you're not watching the videos, I don't know this. So it's important that you communicate with me once you are having issues. So contact me in any way possible, even if it's through another student who's here face to face. Having said that, for this week, we were examining a fairy tale called The Goose Girl and using various critical theories, examining the plot of the story. I have been putting off creating a video for this process because the face-to-face students were having a hard time with it. And every time I was about to give a video, I realized they were having different difficulties accessing the point of the assignment. So I'm going to treat this differently. At the end of today, after I post this video, I'm going to post a dialogue box. On the dialogue box, I'll need you to leave a quick commentary for me. And you'll be getting, basically, it'll be acting as a exercise daily grade. So it'll be a quick question about your understanding of the Goose Girl. Okay? So those are the 2 points I needed to clarify immediately. Excuse me. Finalizing week 6 project and finalizing this week, week 8, a dialogue box. Moving forward, before I tackle the story proper, I'd ask you to read the story. So at this point, if you haven't read the story, stop the video, go back and read the story. Otherwise, my commentary about the story won't make any sense to you. Now, at this juncture, there's a demo out here of European fairy tales. The material in here is a way of generalizing the qualities that make up a folk tale, or in other words, a fairy tale. What was happening during the 1800s, many scholars and academics were investigating and seeking out original works of art from their various countries. They were looking for evidence of a nationality that could help bond a country together more than just the language that everyone spoke within a border, within a mapped out border. In particular, Germany was not a unified country at this point. It was a cluster of kingdoms, and they all spoke German with different dialects, but it wasn't a unified nation unto itself. People were collecting stories of German language in the hopes of, in a sense, unifying all these various kingdoms together as one country. Okay. And that's part of the process. The Grimm brothers, who you've heard of, the Grimm brothers, one of their purposes behind their goals was to find a unifying element, artistic culture within what is now known as Germany. Okay. Specifically, what ended up happening, a defining quality of what makes a fairy tale was developed. I've specifically labeled this European fairy tales. This would include the ones from Asia, this would include the one from the Middle East, and you can include the ones from North America with the native people here. However, I'm targeting specifically the Western European fairy tales. It's easier to identify them using these qualities. So, before we get to the Goose Girl, there are common patterns that are within these stories. Mainly, the patterns exist because they are meant as entertainment for children. They're stories that nannies or mothers or grandparents or uncles would tell children as a source of entertainment. A child hearing the story will instantly pick up on the fact that what they're hearing is a fairy tale, so they have expectations as far as what the closure of the story will be, what the details of the conflict will be, and quickly identifying the protagonist and antagonist. Children need these identifiers in order to stay focused on the tale. As we get older, we can seek out more diverse characterizations of these type of any type of story. So as soon as a child can identify a fairy tale, the quicker you have their interest. So since you yourself were given fairy tales in kindergarten and first grade, elementary school, you have an instant expectation. You've watched Disney cartoons. You have an instant, um, somewhat cliched version of what a fairy tale consists of. Uh, to put it in a simplest form, a basic statement, it's a work that shows a magical representation of the world. Uh, the protagonist is a good guy, the antagonist is a bad guy. For fictional critical analysis, when discussing fairy tales, this is probably one of the rarest times I'll say this. The protagonist is the good guy, the antagonist is the bad guy in fairy tales. Don't use that for higher levels of literature. Also, what's expected in fairy tales, there's a happily ever after. That's a given. 99% of all fairy tales have a happily ever after. Next week, I will be showing you a fairy tale, a folk tale, that defies these qualities. Okay, so be prepared. But for the most part, all of these stories follow the patterns I'm going to show you. And the logic is children need to see a model for them to follow. So good behavior is always given a reward. Bad behavior, what happens? The character deserves and earns harsh punishment. Okay, so the wicked are punished. A good little boy and girl are given rewards. And this is following a basic Western view of the afterworld. If you've sinned, you go to hell. If you've been faithful and you've kept your eye on a heavenly path, you end up in God's grace. Okay. Now, to make this easier, although the slides show there are 13 pages, I'm going to skip ahead quicker so that I can talk about these in group. Okay, so starting from this one page, what's page 7 of the slides, with fairy tales you expect magic. There are magical creatures all over the story. Animals will talk to humans. Humans will have conflict and situations of relationships with talking animals. It's expected. There will be lots of magical situations. When these two events when these two events occur in the story, you're not surprised as a reader. You're not surprised as a character. You expect this in the stories. Likewise, what's important about the protagonist, that character is always typically shown in a sense of a secure environment in like the first paragraph or the first page, and then promptly that's taken away. They're taken out of the secure environment and put into an insecure environment where they are an orphan, put into an orphanage, or there is suddenly a stepchild and the step parent, typically it's the mother, but the stepfather or stepmother are cruel. A prince will be kicked out of the kingdom for a mild crime that he committed by accident, or like in the Bible, the prodigal son, a male figure will ask for his inheritance early so he can have adventures in the world. But it basically follows the formula that the protagonist moves from security to insecurity. So the child listening to the story quickly identifies with this situation. Within the story itself, the plot, the protagonist is going to go through slight transformations. Or let me rephrase that. The protagonist is going to go from either slight to drastic transformations. Usually it's psychologically based. They become mentally aware of their true power as an individual, or they discover they have a stronger sense of magic, which I lump under spirituality, or they have a stronger connection to their religion. Also, a third possibility here, they transform, and for girls, they become more beautiful. They mature into young women of beauty, of cultural desire. The boys, on the other hand, become stronger, more aggressive, more handsome. These three transformations can occur altogether or separately, individually. But as a result, the character gains an epiphany moment. And when I say epiphany, that's a moment where a character suddenly understands their placement in the universe. In fairy tales, typically, a protagonist who's in an insecure environment will suddenly have an epiphany moment and realize they have a quality of magic that they didn't know they had, and they become, through the transformation, they become more powerful, more in control, and they gain a sense of security. They gain their happily ever after. And there are a variety of ways this happens, but typically it's a pattern that they go through a trial period of extreme ugliness, extreme conflict, horrible violence, and then they reach a secure environment and they're happily ever after. Okay, what I have next, okay, basically what I just said. The protagonist proves their worthiness through this whole story. All these variety and diverse points of conflict are showing you, the audience, that the protagonist is indeed earning the title of happiness at the end of the story. Okay. As a result, every event that the character goes through is proving that the protagonist is pure good. It's also proving that the antagonist is pure evil. There are no gray areas for either character. It's a black or white situation, white being magical and religious and pure, black being evil and violent and ugly. The outward appearance of a character mirrors their inward morality. More often than not, a witch will be hideous, will be old, will have a huge nose, will be slumped over, have a horrible laugh, crooked teeth. You know the gambit. You've seen the stories. Whereas the children in the stories are very beautiful children with rosy cheeks and beautiful hair and pleasant attitudes. And again, it's easier for the child as the audience to quickly pick up on who is the good guy and who is the bad guy. And that's why that quality is in most of these stories. Because the antagonist is pure evil, there's no background story that shows how they developed into this horrible creature. They're born evil, they live evil, they don't feel guilty, they eat babies for breakfast, they just live that way. They're going to hell at the end of the story. Consequently, they are very violent people. are very violent monsters. They're gruesome creatures. And likewise, the situations that they cause, that they bring on to other beings in the story, are very violent. It's medieval in a sense of the torture that the antagonists put the protagonists through, the process they put these characters through. As an example, I have the closing. It's on page 12. This is the closing paragraph of Snow White, according to the Grimm brothers. There's more than one version out there. So they found this story, and it doesn't end with a happily ever after. It ends with the death of the queen, the bitter mother of Snow White. And in this particular case, you know the story from Disney, how she transforms herself into a witch to deliver an apple to Snow White. In Disney, the witch falls off a cliff and dies. In the Grimm brothers version, the woman transforms herself back into her beautiful, horrible self, her corrupted self, beautiful on the outside but horribly ugly on the inside. She's tracking what's happening to Snow White, basically. And Snow White has bitten the apple once, and it lodges in her throat, so she falls down in a coma. The dwarves, finding her, don't want to bury her underground, so they put her in a glass coffin. She looks like she's asleep. That's where Prince Charming comes into the picture. He sees her lying there, thinking she's a monument and not in a coffin. She's on display for everyone to see how beautiful she is. So he opens up the box, gives her a kiss. The apple's dislodged. They fall instantly in love, and they're going to get married. Wedding invitations are, of course, sent out. Right here, this last paragraph, the wicked woman is the evil queen. She's received an invitation to the marriage, to the wedding, and she doesn't know what to do. As it says here, she had no peace. She had to go see the young queen. And when she went in, she knew Snow White, and she stood still with rage and fear and could not stir. So all up to this point, it sounds logical. And now you get the extreme violence and the strangely psychological closure. Iron slippers had already been put upon the fire, and they were brought in with tongs and set before her, meaning the evil queen. Then she was forced to put on the red-hot shoes and dance until she dropped down dead. And that's the closure of the story. Not the happily after, but the removal of the antagonist. So because she was such a villainous and horrible mother to Snow White, therefore the evil queen is killed in a medieval torturous concept, and her soul goes straight to hell. Okay. Finally, you'll notice in these stories a pattern number of threes. Usually you're given 3 wishes. The magical source will offer 3 wishes to the protagonist. The protagonist has to go on 3 different journeys in order to prove themselves. Or there are 3 tasks, specifically in mind of boys. The boys have to endure 3 tasks, killing 3 different monsters in which to win the princess and have their happily ever after. Young girls, for the most part, when they have their tasks, they are less violent. Girls are, in these stories, are told to be meek and quiet and just sit there and be able to endure extreme circumstances. They're not allowed to protest. they're not allowed to fight back. Whereas young boys are told to grab the nearest kitchen knife or axe or whatever tool they can find and kill the giant, as in Jack and the Beanstalk. So it's an interesting cultural and societal expectation that's being placed on kids. But that's the formula. Okay? These qualities make up the European fairy tale. Now, I'm going to close here. In a few seconds, I'll make a new video about the Goose Girl proper. What you should do is have this open on another page so that you can go back and forth between what I'm showing you as a story and what qualities make up a perfect fairy tale formula. What you'll find out, if you haven't already recognized, the Goose Girl fits the pattern perfectly. There's only one or two of these where the character is shifted slightly. But for the most part, that story fits these qualities. Okay? So I'm going to post this now. Let me know about the two projects when that time comes. But I'm primarily concerned, again, just to remind you, I'm primarily concerned with the blackout poetry and the explanation of the poem. Talk with you guys in a few seconds.